In this video, we're going to be closely reading chapters 7 and 8 excerpts, and we're analyzing how writers use foil characters and their interactions with other characters to advance the plot. So how does it create conflict and drive the plot? Our task is to highlight using one color any details that reveal Nwoye's traits, and then use a different color to highlight details that reveal Okonkwo's traits, so we can see how they contrast and how that contrast illuminates or draws attention to the differences between the two characters and how that creates conflict. So let's start with this excerpt of chapter 7. For 3 years, Ikemefuna lived in Okonkwo's household, and the elders of Omofia seemed to have forgotten about him. He grew rapidly like a yam tendril in the rainy season and was full of the sap of life. He had become wholly absorbed into his new family. He was like an elder brother to Nwoye, and from the very first seemed to have kindled a new fire in the younger boy. He made him feel grown up, and they no longer spent the evenings in Mother's hut while she cooked, but now sat with Okonkwo in his obi or watched him as he tapped his palm tree for the evening wine. Nothing pleased Nwoye now more than to be sent for by his mother or another of his father's wives to do one of those difficult and masculine tasks in the home, like splitting wood or pounding food. On receiving such a message through a younger brother or sister, Nwoye would feign annoyance and grumble aloud about women and their troubles. So this right here that I've highlighted in yellow shows me that Nwoye is not being genuine, because he doesn't truly dislike doing these things for them. He likes pleasing like the womanly people in his life. So his mother, the other wives, and his younger brothers and sisters. So he's not doing things for like the men, he's doing them for the women, which Okonkwo sees as like a womanly task. Okonkwo was inwardly pleased at his son's development, and he knew it was due to Ikemefuna. So the fact that he is inwardly pleased and not willing to share outwardly that he is pleased with his son, that he's proud of him, he likes the development, shows that Okonkwo is insecure. He doesn't want people to see this like what he thinks is a weak side of himself. He wanted Nwoye to grow into a tough young man capable of ruling his father's household when he was dead and gone to join the ancestors. He wanted him to be a prosperous man, having enough in his barn to feed the ancestors with regular sacrifices. And so he was always happy when he heard him grumbling about women. That showed that in time he would be able to control his womenfolk. No matter how prosperous a man was, if he was unable to rule his women and his children, and especially his women, he was not really a man. He was like the man in the song who had 10 and 1 wives and not enough soup for his fufu. So a couple things here. Okonkwo thinks that not being able to provide for your family makes you less of a man, which it doesn't, but in Okonkwo's heart, in Okonkwo's mind, he thinks like his number one role is to provide for his family. And if a man cannot provide for their family, then they are inferior. Also, we're seeing this being able to control his womenfolk, right? Like Okonkwo thinks he has to control the actions, the feelings, what his wives do, what he deems as women. So like his sons, the men who were less successful than him. This shows that Okonkwo is egotistical, like he has a fragile ego, and he believes that men need to rule women, that they're the ones in control, that masculinity is better than femininity. So Okonkwo encouraged the boys to sit with him in his obi, and he told them stories of the land, masculine stories of violence and bloodshed. So Okonkwo again is like displaying his masculinity. He's telling these very violent stories that contrast really strongly with the stories that Nwoye actually enjoys. Nwoye knew that it was right to be masculine and to be violent, but somehow he still preferred the stories that his mother used to tell, and which she no doubt still told to her younger children. That was the kind of story that Nwoye loved. But he now knew that they were for foolish women and children, and he knew that his father wanted him to be a man. And so he feigned, which means to fake or pretend, that he no longer cared for women's stories. So Nwoye is guarded. That's how I would describe him. He's conflicted about what he actually likes, which Okonkwo considers feminine, but he wants to appear outwardly as masculine to please his father and to keep from being abused by his father. And we see words like foolish to describe women and children. So the author is really focusing our attention here on the way that Okonkwo is characterizing women and children, that they are foolish. That's not what the author actually thinks. He's making commentary here by the way that he's developing these characters. So when he saw that his father was pleased, when Nwoye saw that his father was pleased, he no longer rebuked, which means like to chastise, criticize, or beat him. So he's just trying to prevent his dad from being mad at him. Nwoye and Ikemefuna would listen to Okonkwo's stories about tribal wars or how years ago he had stalked his victim, overpowered him, and obtained his first human head. So as part of the victory celebration, they would take the heads of the men that they killed, and we find out in one of the previous chapters that Okonkwo saved the head of the first man that he killed, and on special occasions he drinks wine out of the skull of that man's head. So it's like bringing out the good dishes for for holidays. He brings out the skull of the first man that he killed to drink wine out of. Okay, for the rest of the text here, so we did the first page together. The second page I want you to do on your own or with a partner. And this is the part of chapters 7 and 8 where Ikemefuna is killed. And we're going to see very different responses from Nwoye and Okonkwo. So they both are grieving, but they display their grief very differently. And because of that contrast, it really highlights the differences in their characters and focuses on those character foils.